So welcome everybody. We'll just wait for a few more folks to join, and then we can get started. We'll wait one more minute. Just for those that are joining, tapping is clapping and sharing is caring. So please share out the video or the live. We're going to talk tonight about some of the good things that the Liberal Party of Canada did for Indigenous people in the last 9 years while Justin Trudeau was the Prime Minister. And we can also talk about some of the things that weren't done and maybe things that weren't done so well. So, okay, well, it is 6 o'clock, so welcome to Beaver Politics, everybody. I'm Treaty 6 Birder, and this is Indigenous Matters. We host Indigenous Matters every Monday night, where we talk about Canadian politics through an Indigenous lens. And in this space, we practice the 7 sacred teachings, which you can see right above me here: honesty, respect, wisdom, love, humility, courage, and truth. So anyone that would like to come on up. You're more than welcome to join me. I'm still always figuring out how to add my guests up, but if you want to come on up, you're welcome to join. And we can chat about some of the good things that Justin Trudeau did during his term as Prime Minister. 3 successful elections he had. Pixie, too bad you're at work, or I'd invite you to come on up. But while we're waiting for people to join, I did do some research tonight. And I was looking up, kind of some of the things, because what I work on is so focused on Indigenous rights as they're related to land and access to land and resources. Hey, Dylan, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. And anyone that wants to come on up, Curtis, if you want to come on up and join the discussion today, you're welcome to join. I see people are just kind of slowly getting in. And we're going to talk about, in honor of Prime Minister Trudeau's departure from his position on, I guess Saturday was his last official day, and yesterday was the results for the election. We're going to talk about some of the good things that were done with the Liberal Party in the last 9 years, and some of the things that weren't done, as well as some of the things that were done but maybe not done so well, or some things that were done great. I did do some research. Like I said, I did some stuff. I looked up some of the land matters first and foremost, because that's always what's of interest to me. And I was looking into the Indigenous-led conservation projects, and there's quite a few actually. $800 million invested over 7 years for Indigenous conservation oversight, covering nearly 1 million square kilometers of land in Canada. That's substantial. That's very substantial and so amazing to for our people. Our people, I've seen it with my own eyes how we grow and we reconnect with our spirit and our ancestors when we're able to reconnect to land. So, hey, Curtis, my friend, welcome. And I want to let you know, I still haven't forgotten about your idea, because I do like your idea to reach out to the gentleman about. It's just everything keeps happening.
But so many things happen like every week to week, like new issues come up with our people. Like another issue is, like the Robinson Huron Treaty about that $5 or $4 and how they got $10 billion and they're entitled to more and they're going back for more. And now in Alberta, the government's giving settlement offers to some First Nations if they'll take a certain amount of money. And, it's for their twine and hunting and fishing rights. It's kind of like the cows and plows, but they're offering very little. But people think it's a lot per person. And it's just another way to end our treaty rights, and hope, we need to look more into these things and know more about those things, because the government can come along and say, I'll give your band 23 million. That's 35,000 per person. There's like so many 600 members in your band. Everyone would like 35,000. Like, we're poor, we're impoverished. But, to end our treaty right to hunting and fishing, our $5 that, what was made, and that it should have increased to billions. And they want to settle for 23 million. That's how the government is. They come and give us an offer, they lowball us, and Like that's how they deceive a lot of our people, and they trick us. They know we're in poverty, and like Trudeau, he said, "Oh, my highest priority is the natives, Indigenous people, and I'm going to make the priority." Stood in front of the Assembly of First Nations, and he said, "I'm going to give everyone clean drinking water. That's my promise." Did we get that promise? Like are there still First Nations in poverty? They don't have clean drinking water in this country, where every politician comes and says, "Oh, they're going to save us and they're going to do good for the natives," and just another lie. We've heard it for 500 years, eh?
Yeah.
And we'll hear it again. The next one coming in will try to end us and end our rights. They always do. They always try to end the Indian Act to say, "Oh, it's racist. Oh, it's this, that." They just want to get rid of our treaty rights, that we have no access to land or have any legality. And we have to defend ourselves against any encroachment from any foreign governments, against our treaty rights and our sovereign rights as people. And it's always been a fight from day one, and it always will be, no matter who's in there.
I don't, yeah.
You could have the Communist Party in there or the Socialists. Don't matter. They're gonna always do the same thing to us because we don't run our country. We're run by colonizers.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with anything you said. And um, it's always about access to resources, because resources what drive economy. And we've been left out of this economy for so long that people struggle to figure out how to bring us back in, and or to bring us in, never mind back in. Um, One thing I do be mindful of is that we do have rights that are now enshrined in the Constitution. And I really don't know how anyone can take away the treaties without having the British Crown involved, because those treaties are with them. And, with what you said about our poverty situation, I feel that government and industry alike takes advantage of the poverty that we face, because they dangle those carrots and it seems lucrative. This is how they get us to agree to projects on the land. They're to give them access to resources, give them access to crown lands where we hunt, fish, trap, and practice our way of life. And they dangle those carrots through impact benefits agreements, employment, training, contracts, those types of things. Yeah, you guys are welcome to the party, right? And here's your little share. And when you think about the multitudes of millions and billions and probably trillions of dollars that have been realized off of the resources that were never given up through treaty or any other agreement, meanwhile we live in poverty. Many of our people do, and rest of Canadians have a pretty good standard of living. Of course, there's some that struggle as well that are non-Indigenous, but that they take advantage of that situation and try to settle these deals. And I agree with you. We should be very cautious about what we enter into with regards to agreements and settlements and compensations, because there is always that underlying goal of trying to, number one, get to those resources and those lands that we stand between them to get to. Our rights do, anyways. And secondly, to minimize their fiduciary obligations and their statutory obligations that they have to us. And some people don't realize in Canada that the government of Canada has a very different relationship with Indigenous people in Canada than they do with non-Indigenous, because of the treaties, because of the Indian Act, and because of the Constitution. Our relationship with the government of Canada is unique, and it's complicated. And they made it this way, and now they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. And it's and like to make it worse, it's the complexities when you're dealing with 634 First Nations that are under the Indian Act. Some are opting out in different ways through the First Nations Land Management Act and the First Nations Oil and Gas Act and the First Nations Monies Act. And I think there's one other one that I can't recall, but there's, other pieces of legislation now that First Nations can opt into to have authorities over their own programs and services. So that's one way that Canada's trying to get out of some of their obligations to us. And some First Nations are going that way. Meanwhile, other First Nations are very concerned about taking those options and taking those steps and moving away from what we know. And I can get it. I understand. So I don't want to be, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit because I was a public service, public servant myself. I started my career in what was Indian Affairs then, but now Indigenous Services Canada. I know how challenging it is from a government of Canada perspective to balance the needs of 634 First Nations, and then you have the Métis as well, and then in the north we have the Inuit, and then all the rest of Canada who pays taxes, and they see us as being some form of burden to them, when in reality I think they've been kind of the burden to us, taking our lands and resources. But so it's just so complicated that I don't know. I don't know, how do we get out of these messes sometimes. Um, I have hope though. Every day I still have hope. But you're right. I think we need to make sure that we're sitting down with those lawyers that represent our chief and councils, and ensuring that we fully understand what these agreements mean for us when we're being offered these types of settlements. Oh, I wanted to add too about the water advisories that you did bring up, Curtis. So there's 147 long-term boil water advisories have been lifted, which is fantastic. 34 only remain. So, having worked for the department, having also worked for the government of Alberta and working in land management, I do feel we need to acknowledge that these are complicated issues in some nations. There's some nations who are struggle with even finding clean water, number one, because the provinces have permitted industrial activity in close proximity to their source water. I've even seen situations where some nations are sadly contaminating their own water source by having their sewage lagoon effluent excuse me, release upstream of where their water intake is. And this is also the fault. This is not to blame First Nations, because Indigenous Services Canada has a role to play in citing where that water intake valve is and where that sewage lagoon outshoot is. So if they're not thinking about this stuff, how can they expect folks that may not have water engineering backgrounds and things like that to catch that kind of a situation? So, but that does happen. We also have provinces over allocating water. And then also I can speak to a personal experience in this, because my husband was a water operator for a First Nation here in Alberta. And I've seen myself over the several years that, I've worked with First Nations for 28 years now. And I know that when we train people on reserve to meet the standard, get the certification to be able to operate a water treatment plant, operate heavy equipment, do any type of, excuse me, trade type of activity, you're going to get paid better off reserve. So oftentimes we get these folks trained up working in these positions, and a good job off reserve that might be close to home comes up with a much better salary and benefits. You may be inclined to take that opportunity. So we lose our staff a lot. And then sometimes we have those situations where we get people that are trained, and something happens in their life that takes them away from their job, and they're not coming to work for a couple days or a couple weeks even, say, and the water hasn't been tested or treated for that period of time, and you end up with a boil water advisory. So that's a real thing that happens. And but we're not ever in a position where, or often we're not in a position to have more than one staff member in that role. So it's usually one person trying to do this work all the time. So, hello, Jan. How are you today?
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. Thanks for joining the conversation.
I must admit, I'm not up to date on it. I'm here to listen, and I'm very pro woman, and I want to know more, and I would like to know how I can help.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. In all honesty, just having you here and joining the conversation and your willingness to listen is the first step. And it's the step in the right direction, and how we start bridging this gap that we have between non-Indigenous and Indigenous people in Canada.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm from Ontario, by the way. Somebody I think there was asking me where I'm from. I'm from
Oh,
Ontario.
nice. Nice. Thank you so much for joining us. And so
Yeah.
I'm in Alberta, and Curtis, who's also on the panel with you there, he's also from Alberta. He's from a First Nation in northern Alberta. You said you're not Indigenous, right?
Correct. Yeah.
No.
There,
Well,
there was something on my father's mother's side. She was French, but I think that there was something, but I can't be positive.
and
So my father
that's
would
kind
always
of
say we're 1/8 Mohawk. I don't know.
well, and they worked. The ancestors of the newcomers that came here in the 1700s onward really worked hard to remove us from our history and our people.
Right.
So even like in my own family, there's members of my family that have decided, you know what, we've been assimilated, we were overtaken or whatever. Let's just leave it behind us and move on.
Oh
So
dear.
right, but that is, and it is just, we've all experienced colonialism in a different way and have come out of it in different ways. And this is something that I, even as an Indigenous woman, like, none of us can profess to know everybody across Turtle Island. And something with reconciliation has really been an eye opener for me too, because I've learned things I didn't know, but I never knew about the 60s scoop. My dad, who was born in the 40s, he never knew about that either, and was kind of shocked and surprised to hear about those things. My father, who is my Indigenous parent, was very fortunate not to have experienced residential schools, but I think some of his cousins did, because some of his, like, he was the child of a young, my grandmother was the youngest of 14. So imagine,
Oh
she was
my.
born in 1906, I think. So some of her older siblings were born in the late 1800s. And so the different life experiences, even that family experienced.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we all have different stories.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how do you keep your culture alive while trying to, move forward? So as you say, I mean, I would I would be very, if I had a culture like that, I would be really, really passionate about it and wanting to keep that alive more than trying to get into society.
So that's a really interesting question. Thank you for that. So it makes me want to ask you, what is your ancestry from?
Uh,
Like, what do you know what your European ancestry is?
yes, English and Irish. More
So
Irish than English, though.
the Irish people have a beautiful culture too, right?
Yeah.
And a very challenging history as well, from what I understand.
Yep.
So, do you work hard to keep that culture alive too? Or you know what I mean? Because this is, I want to kind of turn the table a little bit, but so think about that while I answer the question for you. So for me, because my Indigenous parent, kind of, I think, because of the discrimination that he's experienced, and he's very keeps his experiences close to him. He doesn't
Yes.
share with me much,
Yeah.
and that's, I know, I've been learning about that, and I think it comes from the internalized shame and hatred that we feel being
Yes. And it
Indigenous people.
probably hurts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he wanted to protect me from that, so he raised me with really no connection to my Indigenous people. And even my grandmother, his mother, she was also of the mind that, you know what, we're probably better off to just leave it, which is sad. However, it found me and I found it, and this was the way Creator, I believe, wanted it to be. They experienced hardship that I did not. And I'm blessed that I'm actually feel sometimes a little bit blessed that I was protected from the
Right.
racism and discrimination, and I was given different opportunities. I didn't grow up on reserve, and I feel sometimes sadness about that too, though, because I don't have that connection to culture, language, and people, and way of life, and custom, and so that's, and things I'm trying to reconnect with.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I was given the opportunity to go to university, start a career, which brought me to here, where I have been working hard for 28 years to protect Indigenous rights and to protect our Mother Earth. And
Right.
that journey is where I found my indigeneity and reconnecting again, because I work with First Nations and Métis. So I'm always with people that I can identify with and have taught me along the way. So it's been a journey back for me,
Right.
right? And there's so many other people who've never left, and they've always had their access to culture and language and way of life. So I encourage you, if you have an opportunity to meet other Indigenous people in your neighborhood, or if there's events like powwows or other types of gatherings in nearby, you should try to attend. You know, our people, all of our events are open. Um, if they're a closed event, they won't be at it. It won't be advertised or anything. So there would be no way of you to know, right? So
Right.
if you can try to get to know some people, because there's some really interesting stories. Of course, some of us are still struggling. Um, but we see that in all cultures, right? There's people who
Yes.
struggle just because, we all have trauma. We've
Mhm.
experienced some way. And if it's not us directly, it could have been our ancestors. So does that help a
You,
little bit?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
I
Thank
think
you.
you.
Yes. I married a New Zealander. And when we were first married, we went to New Zealand to live. And of course, we were just thrown into the thick of the Maori down there. And that they're fascinating people, I mean, so I got to learn about those. And when we went to live in Australia, of course, there's the Indigenous there. So I have been exposed to a great deal of different Indigenous cultures. Um, and everybody, it's nice to, well, it's not nice to, I hear the same things from people just as you explained your experiences. And it really doesn't matter what country they're in. They're all having the same issues, which I think is very interesting. And then the governments handle it so differently. Um, yes, I will. I will. I'll look out now for events that are around, and I'll attend them and just see what I can do.
Awesome. Okay, and then just so for everybody that's just getting onto the live, remember that tapping is clapping,
Oh yes.
sharing is caring. Thank you for joining our lives, and welcome everybody to Indigenous Matters on the Beaver Politics Network. And while we're here, everybody that's on the panel, we try to take our turns and be mindful of each other. No speaking over one another. Please wait for that pause at the end of somebody's when they're speaking, so that before you chime in or ask to speak, if you'd like to, please. And Curtis, I see that you did unmute while Jan was speaking. Did you want to add to what she was talking about?
Brought up an interesting point, because I do know a lot of our people hid. Some of them didn't wanted to assimilate, and some of them hid their ancestry, and a lot of them did look native, so it was probably harder for them to hide it. But a lot of them just didn't want anything to do with being native. Like, they just, even though they looked it, they just tried to assimilate as much as they could.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad is as indigenous looking as you can be. So it was hard for him to hide it, but he did. He went through life. He's made it way through. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna just go through the panel from top to bottom. Smarshy, if you're there, would you like to join the conversation? We were going to talk about some of the good things that Trudeau has done for the
Yeah,
Indigenous people in Canada, but you know me, we can talk about whatever we need to talk about, because that's
yeah.
our way.
I do believe he did a lot of good for the Indigenous people in Canada with giving back the land to the Inuit and giving the land back to the Haida and I think that was a really good thing he did. You know, it's been a blessing for them. Now it's just time for all of us to band together and get the rest of the land given back. And I think that's really important to focus on the future and not what's behind, right? Because we've gotten so far with so little, but we need to band together and stop arguing with each other. And the anti-indigenous needs to stop. And I think that's a big part is we just need to understand that everybody has different walks of life in the Indigenous culture. Not everybody's going to know the Indigenous culture, and then not everyone's going to have every question you ask them. But it just means that it it's it's beautiful to see, and it's saddening to see that he's gone. So that's all I want to say. I may get kicked off because my phone's gonna unalive soon. So if I don't drop suddenly, that's just why.
Okay. Thank you, Smarshy. Can everybody hear me for sure? I'm not sure I'm using my mute button properly.
No, it's good. No.
Okay, good. Just before we move on from what Smarshy, I do want to just add to this. I know I totally agree. It was such a wonderful thing he did for the Inuit people in the north, giving them their land. The Haida Gwaii also, they received their title to land. And I did pull up some stats. So the government had committed significant funding to Indigenous-led conservation efforts, including $800 million over 7 years for projects covering nearly 1 million square kilometers of land. So that's Indigenous-led conservation projects. And then there was an Indigenous-led area-based conservation initiative. And this program provides funding to Indigenous communities to establish protected areas and conserve ecologically significant lands. To date, 94 Indigenous communities have received a combined $202 million for such projects. And this reminds me of something I want to share with everybody. So when we have reserve lands, where there's 634 First Nations in Canada, most of whom, not all, have land. So there's something that a lot of people may not know, but most have some land set aside for them under the Indian Act, and that's an Indian reserve. Many of these reserve lands, much of the reserve land in Canada remains intact, untouched, unaltered from colonization. Some has been because there's been agriculture. There was a lot of efforts to try to encourage our ancestors to be agriculturally proficient. And then we got too good at it, and they started making it illegal to buy crops from Indigenous people because our crops were just that good. Anyways, that's a side note. But why I bring this up is because 80% of the remaining biodiversity on this planet is being cared for by 5% of the people. And that 5% is us, the Indigenous people on the world, on Mother Earth.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So most of the intact land that remains in the planet is under the care of Indigenous people. And
yeah, that's got to be known. That's got to be spread further. I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's the United Nations that's one of their statistics, and they have a sustainability program, and I'm pretty sure that's where I pulled that from. I know that the Native Women's Council of Canada also has some stats around that too, because I was working on some biodiversity meetings with them, so I did learn some of that statistics there. So it's quite alarming, right? And here's something else, and I can only speak to the Alberta perspective because I don't work in every province, and I am spreading out a little more. But here in Alberta, we've done some work with some data analysts, and only 9% of Alberta remains intact.
Oh my.
91% of Alberta has been altered, developed, or impacted in some way by industrial activity, forestry, roads, towns, settlement, agriculture, oil and gas.
How much?
91% of Alberta
What?
is disturbed.
Oh my.
It doesn't surprise me.
So
Doesn't surprise me at all.
keep in mind, this is also using buffers around disturbance, because this is a study done for Indigenous use, because Indigenous people don't want to hunt or pick medicines next to a well site, right? So you put a buffer around that area where you know that you're less likely to find Indigenous use, because we can't trust the health of the medicines. I don't want to pick berries that are growing right beside a well site. Like, I don't know. You don't know, right? You don't know. You can't trust that they're healthy. And you don't know what kind of health impacts might happen because of consuming that.
Would it be because they're contaminated, maybe?
Oh, there's a potential, right? But that's why we don't trust to hunt there or to pick there. And I have met people who, will go, they use the access roads to get into the bush, but generally our people might drive up to the bush, like up to a well site, and then walk into the bush for a kilometer or more. Excuse me, before they, find game that they're willing to consume. One more land stat, and then we'll move on to Reantics.
Hello.
Hi there. I'll give one more little stat
Sure.
here that I left today, and then I'll turn the mic over to you. Okay. Just one more thing. So support for Indigenous-led leadership or Indigenous leadership in conservation. The government has emphasized the importance of Indigenous leadership in achieving Canada's conservation goals, such as conserving 30% of land and water by 2030. These are commitments that were made, and I like to share these things with everybody because it's important that all of us, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, hold government to these types of commitments, because a little chill and a little secret. We might look like we have a lot of water available in Canada, but we're running out. And people always argue with me about this, and I've seen some research that says that we may only have a quarter of a century of water left. And when people go, oh no, how can that be? Because there's so much water everywhere. But you have to remember, we can't run rivers dry. We can't take every drop out of a lake or a wetland or out of the ground. Like, we need to keep water in the system to keep this planet living. So we can, like, you have to be mindful of that, how much we're losing through glacial recession. So our glaciers are receding at an alarming rate. We're not getting the snowpack in the mountains that we used to get. Our glaciers on the poles are also melting, and we have ice caps leaving, and we've got permafrost melting. So we need to be mindful of these types of commitments that are made by government and hold them to account so that we have clean, healthy environment, including water for all of us. Anyways, okay, tell me how to pronounce your name properly. Reantics? Reantics?
Yes, it's Ray Antics.
Okay, there we go. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, because my name is Rayanne, so
Okay.
it was a silly joke someone made years ago, and I'm
Oh,
stuck with it.
I like it.
Um,
Reantics. Okay. Thank you.
can I just ask where you are in Alberta?
I am in central Alberta. I
Oh,
am
cool.
in Treaty 6 territory, just 30 minutes west of Musquatchie, so an hour and a bit southwest of Edmonton.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, no, I'm from Lethbridge, so I grew up in Lethbridge, and I don't really have a ton to say. I'm just happy to be here to help support and listen to what you have to say because when I was growing up, it was very influential on my life to have exposure to Indigenous just history, Indigenous everything Indigenous, and it really helped me understand better. And I lean pagan already, so it was already within my mind scope to care about the environment in ways that maybe others didn't. So I've always really appreciated that about the Indigenous kind of mentality and yeah, no, I'm glad that the government in some ways does respond, but I feel like there's still miles to go, right? Because there's still a ton of topics to kind of cover, and I think the best thing we can do for ourselves is to truly honor a lot of the things that we haven't honored in the past, and to truly respect, like what I'm seeing in the States now between their national parks. The way that they're willing to compromise them really upsets me because this is one of the few things that you have going for you is that there was this respect garnered for these precious sacred lands, these places where you could go and it would not be touched. They would not be affected by greed or by these other things. They were meant to be a way to reconnect with nature, reconnect with spirituality. And so it's very sad to me, you know? So I'm again, I'm just here to support. I love so much what you're talking about. And I'm glad that there were some things respected, but I think we still have a lot to work on. And that's what I'm going to focus on with all the frustrations I have currently.
Well, thank you so much for joining the conversation from the Windy City. And I have some stuff to add too, but I saw Smarshy had her hand up, and I think probably because she's from Lethbridge too. Smarshy, go
No,
ahead.
actually, I'm not. I'm
Oh,
I'm an
Medicine
hour and a
Hat.
half away from Lethbridge. I'm in
Right.
Medicine
Sorry,
Hat.
Medicine Hat. Yeah, sorry.
No, there was someone in the comments that wanted to talk about UNDRIP and how Canada hasn't signed it yet. They had made a few comments. We were talking in the comment section before I came up, and I just thought we could talk about that, maybe.
So I'm not sure if we do have the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act in
Right.
Canada.
And that's why I was confused and I was trying to understand.
So if
Maybe we
maybe
have
they mean signing on to the international agreement. And I'm not, let me have some, I'll search that up.
Yeah, and you just like I said, if you can find it,
I'm just thinking, you know, there's a lot of politics involved in all of that. And there's some things I heard too from folks, Indigenous folks, that were actually involved at Geneva and all the other locations where they were negotiating the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And a lot of stuff was taken out of that. There were the Inuit from all, not just from Canada, the Inuit from Canada, from Greenland, Russia. They wanted ice to be given rights because ice is critical to their livelihood, their way of life, their culture, their language. The people in South America, they wanted the Amazon, the jungles, to be given personhood and given rights the same way. And then other people from across the globe, I believe from what I heard, now I wasn't there, these are stories I've heard, so I'm sharing this, you know, secondhand. But I've understood that there were other than Indigenous groups that come up, you know, these are what's important to me on or us on from our lands that are
Exactly.
critical, and those were not accepted. So I can't really speak right now to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People through the UN, but I do know that we have legislation here in Canada, and it may not be perfect. Um, there's not a lot of teeth to it. There's a lot of promises, but no real way to make them happen. But, and I was part of this, they took for about a year and a half, I think about 18 months following the enactment of the legislation. There was an opportunity, and this came with funding. So, you know, because we don't have a lot of time, we always have to hire consultants and stuff to help us with some of these things, and oftentimes lawyers to make sure our best interest is being taken care of. We, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit alike, were given funding to work with Canada to come out with an action plan on how they can deliver on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And from that came 181 action measures. So those are, many of those are underway. And what this is what concerns me and scares me about, excuse me, having a potential Pierre Poilievre government is he may not scrap the UN DEC Act, but I can almost guarantee you he will scrap the funding for the action plan measures. So that would mean all of that good work that's started would stop and maybe have to wait for a new government to come back and then restart again. And then what happens? You got 4 or 8 years, excuse me, depending on the terms of the new leadership. And then you get turnover in chief and councils within nations and leadership in Métis groups and leadership in the Inuit as well. And then you lose all this traction that was made and you have to basically start over again.
right. And
That's really sad.
I'm just gonna say something really quick because my phone is unaliving and I don't think I'm gonna be able to hold up. I might if I run up the stairs really quickly, but I can't promise anything. It scares me to have someone like Paul Yeb running for prime minister when he has got no empathy, no morality, no integrity. I look
None.
for a candidate that actually gives a crap about our country and the first people here and actually sees and hears us. And that's what I'm fearing with Paul Yeb if he gets in.
Yeah.
It's going to be so bad for the marginalized groups in Canada. And that's my
I
biggest
don't.
fear.
I don't think he's going to get in. To be fair, though,
No,
With Carney in place, I don't think he will. And I'm only praying with it. You know what I mean? So
but what I'm saying is, as an Indigenous person,
for
I'm,
sure, for sure.
I'm fearful because we don't
Yeah.
know.
And he's romanticizes the good old days of Sir John A. Macdonald.
Oh Lord above.
Anyways, okay. So, and I just one other thing, Ray Antics. I was kind of picking up what you were talking about with the national parks and stuff, and I found something really concerning with what's happening with the rhetoric coming from the president down there, and his desire to just harvest all minerals, harvest all lumber and
Exactly.
everything. Who cares if there's
Exactly.
endangered species? Who cares about anything like that? So that has implications on our Indigenous rights here too,
Absolutely.
because
Absolutely.
some of those endangered species are migratory and they come
Exactly.
here. This is their home. You know, birds that lay their eggs here, they evolved here, but they evolved to
Yes.
leave here in the winter because,
Yeah.
it's cold. So those birds belong here. And when they take away their wintering grounds, they're impacting us here in Canada as well. So we should be fighting for those species. Some of those species might have cultural significance to Indigenous people. Some of those people
Absolutely.
just might, the species might be just critically important to non-Indigenous people. Curtis, go ahead.
I seen that one post on TikTok. It said this one was pointing at these Canadian geese and saying, "You better go back to Canada before he renames you American geese."
Oh my god.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I saw one. I saw one today too. This lady's like, she was an American. She's like, I can hear Canadians laughing at us from all the way from down here. And she opens her car door, and there's a bunch of geese barking outside.
I mean, speaking of what Curtis just said, I was talking with my friends. I'm like, yeah, the Canadian geese are gonna get deported back to Canada. And she starts laughing, and Curtis just brought that up. I thought that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's so fun. And like I seen a lot of jokes going around too about geese beating up eagles, and yeah, it's
Well, not even just that, too, with the wood production, is that I saw an amazing guy who was talking about the different types of wood that exist. And the reason that we're leaned on so heavily as Canadians for our lumber isn't just because of our good practices of replanting, but also because our wood is better. It's just better wood. It's like the trees that we can get up here are better than their trees. So even if they did all this like cutting and slashing, it wouldn't even, it'd be for naught. It's not even the type of wood you would need. It's not even the wood that would last.
yeah,
So it would just be a sadness. You know what I mean? It would just be an overall sadness as well.
it's yeah for nothing. And then you know what? And like I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but this links to something I think about here, but I'll finish. So for if they start clearing lands like that and getting rid of forest, then it opens lands too for settlement and agriculture, right? Because we're going to enter into food security years coming ahead. With climate change, we're going to have a hard time growing food. So I can't help but speculate if they want to start clearing more land so that they can, start thinking about their future in food sovereignty. And also, so I think about that here from a Canadian perspective. And I've thought about this because Alberta doesn't like to invest too much in fire prevention. And I've hazard to think sometimes that perhaps they don't do that because when a forest burns down, it's much easier to get to those resources below the ground, and you don't have to get through the Indigenous people and talk about what the impacts to our rights are because that forest is already gone.
I think it's maybe that's why Danielle Smith said, "Oh, there's no money to get into building or rebuilding Jasper National Park. Like it's no big deal that it just burnt to the ground. Like
I think that's also posturing with the federal government. So because there's a shared relationship there. It's a national park, but it's a municipality, an Alberta municipality within the park, right? The town of Jasper. So that could be posturing and playing games with the feds, but and also it could be that too. Like, but the thing with the park is they're never gonna develop the park for resources. National parks first priority, even though Banff would argue differently, is conservation, not
Exactly.
tourism. Tourism is a secondary use. So I boycotted Banff in like 1989. I've had to go back a few times because of meetings and things like that. But I don't believe we should have these, Louis Vuitton and Coach stores and
No.
they've destroyed, completely altered some really significant habitat for grizzly bears, for elk, so wolves, and yeah. So
No.
it is what it
Waterton
is,
is
though.
still, yeah, Waterton's still my favorite because well, at least since I went back, we unfortunately when I went back last, there was lots of smoke, because it had just been after a fire.
Yeah.
But I would say to you, I don't, I think it's really adorable you think that that's a conspiracy theory because that's actually more provable than like 90% of the conspiracy theories out there.
Oh,
But
thank
also I also think it's just not, I think in a practical level they just look at it as like to do fire prevention would cost more than they're willing to spend kind of thing also, like I agree with you. I think they think, oh, worst case scenario, it burns to the ground, we can take stuff from it. But also,
Right.
I think the money it takes to actually do fire prevention is a big investment. And
Yeah.
we still don't have enough people on side for the environment, like by far, right? Look at the Green Party. The Green Party does not do enough doesn't do well enough every year for us all to go, oh, everyone's on the same side. Like, most people are willing to like completely sell out their entire environment for greed. We see it in the States especially, and we see it here now happening more and more. And that's frustrating for me because it's one of the best parts I always loved about Canada, you know?
Right. And I pose a question because I'm thinking about it now. I haven't been to Banff since 2008 and, or no, 2007. Yeah. So it's been a while since I've been down there. And I look around and everyone's like, oh, we're going to Banff. We're going to do this. We're going to, we're going to do everything. We're going to go skiing. We're going to go lodging. I'm like, okay. So I look at Jasper burning down and I look at it now. Banff has never had that problem. Banff has always stayed Banff. And no,
Never.
not that I know of. Like, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But there has never been a fire in Banff that I know of. And I'm just
No.
like,
Yeah.
mm, it really begs the question of,
Oh, it's economically important to Alberta
right,
because people
Exactly.
go from Banff to Calgary and they spend their money in both places. And you have to usually land in Calgary to get to Banff. And
right.
you see tons of tourists from Europe and China and Japan. And so it's an economic hub. So of course they want to protect that. But I want to be mindful. Lady has been waiting, but Ray Antics, sorry, I do I want to acknowledge you're in Treaty 7 territory and you're in the homelands of the Blackfoot and there are Métis people that also are in southern Alberta, even though Alberta likes to say there's no Métis south of
I'm
Morning.
right here.
Yeah, I know. I know, darling. So I hope if you ever get a chance to, you should go out to the Kainai powwow or to the Pekani powwow or and join in some of those events because they're beautiful places. But we'll get back to you and we'll give Lady a chance because she's been waiting so patiently.
Absolutely.
Thank you for giving me a minute. Hello. Thank you so much for doing this. I feel like I'm getting to know you, and it's just so nice to learn. I am, I believe, in Treaty 6, and so I'm just north of Edmonton, in the West Lock area.
Ooh, Eslock.
Yeah. And so I think with the current state of affairs, I certainly have gotten more political and have been trying to learn more. And I was just wondering, like, from your perspective, or how best can like our members of parliament and government help? Like I heard like some of the things that the liberals did for the indigenous, but I was wondering if, like, I don't know, what would you look for in a leader for an area?
So this is so complicated. And I can only really speak from because I work in land, but land protection, environmental protection, land management, so in various types of land management on reserve too. So environmental protection on reserve, waste management. One of the biggest factors that causes us the most grief is that we don't have enough time. The world doesn't slow down for us to catch up. We're still like decades behind. So here's one thing I'll share. When I worked for a First Nation here in Central Alberta, and I was even surprised. Like I've been 28 years in my career, and I never knew this until I started working for the First Nation directly, the one. And the housing budget, the housing maintenance budget, has not been changed or grown since the 80s.
Oh.
So we're living on budgets and ways that to function within your own administration and office that from 40 years ago. So like even the way that a KFWIC I would do invoicing, had to do everything by hand. We didn't have a system to send off our invoices over to our finance department so that they could get paid. I had to write everything up by hand, like just simple things like that, right? But you think about, like, if I had 20 invoices I had to send over to finance today, that could take me half an hour of my day. That might have been only 15 minutes if I could scan them in and send them over or something, right?
Right.
So just those are just really simplified examples, but really speak to the reality that we're facing in our First Nation communities, so on reserve. But even within Métis organizations, they haven't had all the funding or any type of supports for decades either. So we're playing catch up all the time. And the rest of Canada never slows down for us, ever. It just continues to truck along. Even in reconciliation, I want to say that I have witnessed industry and government taking leaps and bounds. There's some really good companies and good people out there that see that this is an opportunity to do better by Indigenous people, but they're going so far ahead that they're even, outpacing us. So that to me is a big struggle, is the time lag that we have between where we are with our resources and our capacity, and then also the funding and the money. So we are the playing field is very uneven. So I can talk about, in all honesty, so what I did for a living when I worked for the First Nation I worked for was I was their consultation and lands manager. And what consultation means is when a company has a proposed development on Crown lands, like say a pipeline, they're obligated to speak with First Nations Métis to understand how that project would be impacting the rights and uses on the land of those Indigenous people. So that takes a lot of work, right? And when I've done this job for industry, I've done it for government, and I've done it for the Métis and for First Nations. So when I worked for industry, I was making a 6-figure salary. I had a team of people that worked around the table with me, 20 other people that were engineers, environmental experts, community relations experts, regulatory experts, design experts, soils folks, you name it, they're around that table. I would have, say, maybe 5 or 6 projects that I was leading the consultation on. Maybe the busiest I got was 10 max, but some of those would have been small projects and maybe a couple big projects. So fast track to when I go and work for a First Nation. I'm doing the same type of job, but now I'm just sitting on the First Nation side of the table. I had a staff of 1. The funding that we received for to run that consultation office, to be consulted on up to 40 projects at a time sometimes, because we're talking to government about their policies, we're talking to companies about their projects, we're talking to all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. Sometimes we're dealing with our neighbors. So we'd have a lot of projects on our desks. So there was me, 1 staff, and say 40 projects at any given time. And plus I was wearing other hats, but just think about the consultation role I played. We got $110,000 a year to cover salaries, benefits, travel, training, lawyers, environmental consultants, and our overhead. That was my salary when I worked for industry was more than that.
That's yeah.
So
yeah, not even close.
So if government and industry alike, and all levels of government, not just the federal government, so if governments and industry would address those 2 things, the time and the money that we need to catch up so that we can be at the same level in the playing field, live the same standard of living, then maybe we would have equity, right? We would be nearing some equity. It wouldn't, it's going to take more than that, but it would be definitely very much more helpful and would get us through some of these challenges a little easier. But nobody slows down for us, and people see us as financial burdens.
And yeah, I definitely don't. And I want to speak to that because so I've gotten volunteering now with a political party. I'm not going to say because I don't want to be disingenuous, but I'm trying to do as much like research about how best to go about, you know, making those contacts and getting that kind of information without, because I feel like that you are probably faced with politicians coming every election, you know, coming to be like, oh, here, this is what I can do for you, or for the community, and then for it just to switch around, like you said, like back and flip and flop. And I've noticed a lot in Treaty 8, like what's going on with the premier, and how she isn't consulting with I believe it's the Onion Lake.
Sturgeon Lake. Is this
Yeah,
over
Sturgeon
the
Lake.
data?
And
Yeah, the
yeah,
data facility.
yeah. And I'm just thinking how, like, how could a political like a MP help in that capacity? But
So
that sounds like it's like more of like a provincial issue. It
that's
makes.
definitely a provincial issue and it's a jurisdictional matter. But I wish, like you said, we must hear a lot from MPs or people running and stuff. We don't. And the reason we don't is because traditionally we don't vote. So they don't invest a lot of time coming to see us during their campaigns or reaching out, doing any outreach within First Nation communities. I can say though, because I don't live on reserve, but I have a business, so I keep my business on reserve. And I have a post office box on reserve, and I do get a lot of flyers from my local MP who is a conservative. So I find that kind of interesting. And I did actually go to one of his roundtables. And I don't see any flyers from the other parties. So I kind of find that interesting as well, because it was the last party I thought I'd find reaching out to Indigenous people was the Conservative Party. But they proved me wrong. And so
What is that?
I was surprised, but they normally don't spend a lot of effort on trying to reach us during election campaigns because, in all honesty, we don't vote.
Yeah. So knowing that, but how would be the best way to go about that? Because I think I would like to. I have an ear in somebody running, and I would like to change that. And I would like, because I know our current MP, he is conservative, and he's sitting like in the Indigenous Affairs board in the government, and if he's failing, probably. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of him, and that's why I got into running myself. So I'm like, I bet you he is not doing a good job for everyone. So yeah, what is it? So would we just go to Powell's? Like, how? Tell me,
You
talk
know,
to me.
I I've been thinking a lot about this too, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to start with Indigenous Matters also, was because of the critical times we're in. I think it's important that we have these discussions with Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, because I want to figure out how we get our people to vote. I understand why we don't vote. Like I myself, I've always voted, but that's just me, right? But a lot of our people don't vote, rightfully so, because this is a system that was imposed upon us. It's a system that wasn't designed for us, by us, with us in mind. This is a system that fails us over and over and over again. And it's a system that we can't trust. So we need to break those barriers down. We need to find people who are going to run in this country that are willing to put on their big boots and get out onto the ground and go and meet the grassroots people and talk to them about what the issues are from the people, and then how we can work as a government together to reflect Indigenous voices in policy, in programs, in the way things that are being implemented, in the way we write and review legislation and regulation. So it's a complicated mess that we've created here. And this takes me back to what I was talking about earlier when you asked about how we're going to fix some of this. The time, it's going to take some time to change these things. And just sadly, the world doesn't slow down for us. So
Right.
I'm so happy though that you're asking these questions, because they're really important questions, and it really makes me feel good to know that there's people in the world that are thinking about this too, besides just us that are around this table. Because I don't know if I've seen you in our live before, but if you've been here, sometimes I don't get to. I don't keep track of the comments very well. I like to be engaged and make sure I'm talking with everybody on the panel. So if you've been in the comments before, lady, I'm sorry if I've missed you, but I'm really glad that you came up today.
No, I really appreciate the feedback, and no, normally I just lurk, but we just announced today, and I'm like, I want to go and make a difference for our area, and so I hope.
So you said you're in Treaty 6 territory?
Yes,
In Alberta or Saskatchewan?
in Alberta, so we're north of Edmonton. So the riding is Peace River Westlock. So
So
it
that
goes.
should be Treaty 8, I think.
Yeah, I think it starts at Treaty 6. Like we're just on the very
Oh,
north
you're on
of
the.
6, and then it
I
goes
believe
to
it.
Treaty 8.
Okay.
So yeah, it's and I, yeah, because I never want to say the wrong thing, like cuz I'm a YT, like I just don't know, right? But at the same time, like my heart is in a really good place, and I want to advocate for a better government, but then I know how much the system has failed too. So I feel like almost like guilty because I'm a part of it, but then knowing that it needs to be better, and it needs to serve all, everybody on Turtle Island.
I truly appreciate that. And I've heard this before. Like, you're not the first person to even say this to me in the last couple of days about being afraid to say the wrong thing. And one thing about our people, even when you say the wrong thing, we usually come back with kindness, unless what you said was, we can tell the intent in which you say it, right?
Right.
And normally most of us, and of course we're humans and we have different people in all walks of life, right? But for the most part, we'll quickly correct you, and most people will do it in a kind way.
I just want to say I'm your neighbor. I'm in the Athabasca area.
Oh, hello. Yeah, you're really
I'm
close.
yeah, I'm Cree from Bigstone. Bigstone is the nation just north of Athabasca.
Okay.
And we're in a conservative riding too, and our MLA or MP, I can't remember, Scott Sinclair. He's conservative and he's native. I think he's Métis or Cree. Can't remember, but yeah, he's from the Slave Lake area and he's in our riding. So
Did you hear what happened to him?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you're asking.
Curtis, the UCP have basically made him step down because he was defending his people.
he's no longer an MP.
He is an MP, but he's not in caucus anymore.
Oh, like he's not a member of the Conservatives.
He is, but they won't let him up on this. He can't speak in the House anymore.
Oh my God! So they silenced him?
Yeah, because he was standing up for First Nations and Métis.
Wow.
Yeah, he's the MLA for that, and you're right, and I think he'll be officially independent now. I don't think he's even UCP anymore. I think he will be.
Like what nation or what was the situation?
So I know a little bit. So basically, the budget came out, and it focused primarily on city infrastructure and big, I don't know, like a stadium or something like that. And Mr. Sinclair, he was like, "What? Hey, what about our roads up here? Like, what? You're forgetting about the rural Albertans." And then he wrote an open letter about it, and they weren't very happy with that, and they give him the boot.
So in the news it says rural Alberta MLA booted from the UCP caucus for refusing to support the budget.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's what we want. Our I don't vote conservative normally.
God,
but
it's kind of like if you don't pull the line, then you're punished. Eh? Kind of like can't have any. Wow, might as well be the Communist Party.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the UCP is failing miserably, but it's not. But you vote for, you want. Rural Albertans are often forgot about, because the city and the that's where it flips, right? So they put their money and their attention into that, and I noticed the rest of Alberta is generally conservative through and through. So when they don't have to win your vote, they don't they focus as much. So
Yeah, they don't care. So pumpkins.
Party are you running for? Like, if you don't mind me asking.
so I'm not
Well,
the
who are you supporting? I
candidate.
mean, your
Yeah.
candidate. Who's your candidate? Like, what party?
So it'll be Landon Trisher, and he's with the NDP.
Oh,
Woo woo.
So Arnold Viersen is the current MP, and I got really passionate because he has brought in his beliefs and his religion, and he's advocating to get rid of women's health care, and he said he would strike down gay marriage if it came up again. And I'm like, we see what's happening to our neighbors in the south, and it started to get the wheels turning, and I'm like, how is our government like failing us? And then
isn't Westlock had a bylaw against rainbow colors on their sidewalks or
Yeah.
something?
yeah,
And Valley View scrapped the library for where it was a safe space for. I think
And
it's crazy. Just one quick second. I just want to let Pumpkin Spice Latte has a question. So there was a UCP MLA, Scott Sinclair, who's Métis, and he was from the Treaty 8 territory. The UCP have removed him from caucus because he didn't support the budget and the line items. And I think Lady said it was through relation to underfunding for infrastructure in the north.
Yeah, we need to demand better from our politicians, but
Absolutely. Curtis, if you go follow Brooks Arcan Paul, he's an MLA, he's an NDP MLA, and he's done some videos on Scott Sinclair.
good.
And
Can you send them to me?
I will. And there's another one, Jody Stonehouse Callahoo.
Oh yeah,
I'll send them both to you.
I know Jody.
Oh, okay, good.
Actually, yeah, I know Jody.
I hope I meet her. I'm like such a fan of Jody too. And there's an AGM coming up in May, and I'm like, I have my little list. And I'm
We'll see you there.
Oh, that'll be
I'm
amazing. Okay, I will come and introduce myself. But I'm so thankful for this opportunity to speak with you and here. And I'm gonna stay down in the comments. I gotta put my kids here to bed, but I look forward to hearing a lot more. So, thank you.
Well, look who it is. It's Sir John A. himself.
Oh God.
I know everybody's like,
Oh my God.
Well, tell us what you got to say.
I kind of got the last skip bit of what you said. I kind of jumped in because it looked like a good conversation to get into. You're talking about rural Canadians. Am I correct? And access to resources and
Indigenous rural Canadians, but Indigenous Canadians, really, not just rural.
Well,
but, yes.
I was gonna say, I mean, hand in hand, rural Canadians. The access is poor when it comes, especially in the territories, to just basic necessities. So I'm just kind of curious what your guys' idea of like what a good plan would be to help people in rural.
My first question is, why you call yourself John A. MacDonald after a president that committed genocide towards Indigenous people and come on Indigenous panel?
I didn't really think that much into it because I feel like the Canadian image has kind of gone to a different side of the spectrum. So I'm just like, okay, well, I'm just gonna make up a character that's the first prime minister, and we'll start from scratch.
Okay, well, it's interesting that you joined our live. So, are you from Canada?
Yes.
And you're over 18.
Yes.
Okay. I do want to I have one comment. So, yes, rural can include everybody, and that there are rural non-Indigenous people that also struggle with infrastructure, like the roads conditions and things like that. But I can tell you truthfully, because of experience, that we have First Nations that are in close proximity to cities, that have roads that beat up your car. I know people that have to get a new car every couple years. and the roads are so bad that ambulances can't get in when there's an emergency, and fire trucks. And these are adjacent to cities or in close proximity to cities or bigger towns. So that's a problem. Anyway, then
Yeah.
it just shows the disparity between the non-Indigenous rural population and the Indigenous rural population.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I agree. Yeah, I was more speaking on behalf because I've worked in all parts of the country. Um, I've been to very very rural areas where we're not just talking like roads. We're talking about just general access to emergency services. Being able to protect yourself from bad people in rural areas, animals, water, uh, road access, taxes on uh, uh, things such as natural gas for heating. Um, like there's so like close to a city, yes, there's obviously access issues like you were saying, but there's some parts of the country that are so rural that it's there's just absolutely no infrastructure. So I'm just kind of curious what your guys's um, solution is for that.
I do want to okay, especially if you're thinking about those really remote First Nations and Inuit communities. I will have to argue with you a little bit. We do have infrastructure. Our trails, the rivers, all of those are our infrastructure that our ancestors used for millennia. Like we traveled, right? So we didn't use pavement, but we did use infrastructure to get around, and it was just infrastructure that Mother Earth gifted us with. So I just want to make sure that everyone, because sometimes that when we talk like that, it paints a picture of us living like these wild savages that people want to believe that's how we lived, right? And we had a very structured society. We had we had systems in place that we utilized. So I would argue a bit that, I've been to remote communities, flying communities in northern Alberta as well as in northern Ontario. And I really felt like I went back in time. It was such a beautiful place to be where everyone still spoke their language, still consumed foods off the land, practiced their culture and their way of life. Like they're picking medicines and the kids are all speaking their language. And, they still have, of course, they have the new technologies. Instead of taking dog sleds and stuff out onto the land, they're using skidoos or ATVs and things. But they still do live quite remotely and they live well. But what I do find the difference between the way people who live in more less remote areas is their cost of food. And like, you see like the $40 watermelons and things like that. And that's really unreasonable. And I think that's a problem with the northern store. And don't get me started on the northern store.
Neither.
Anyways, okay. So John A, are you good? We'll park it for a minute and we'll move on to pumpkin spice, or did you want to add some more? Did I even answer your question?
No, I just wanted to ask you guys some questions. That's all.
I think you should
But
do some research on to John A. Macdonald, what he did to the native people back in the day.
Yeah, it's not
It
good.
was horrible. The residential schools, Duncan Campbell Scott, he wanted to wipe out Indians, and it's just horrible. Like it is, it's history, but it's an awful history.
yeah, no history is ever pretty ever.
Yeah.
I think no matter where you stand from a moral ground, no history is pretty. But anyways, I appreciate you guys having me up.
And maybe just I want to elaborate just a bit more on what your question was. And I think that sometimes the solution isn't necessarily trying to give remote or rural Indigenous people the same kind of life that we all have south or closer to urban centers, but the life that they desire. If we're trying to achieve the standard of living that they are seeking, then like I'm thinking, I always comes to mind for me as those remote communities in Ontario, because Now we're talking about the Ring of Fire and the minerals that are in Northern Ontario. And I know what happened to the First Nations in Northeast Alberta when the oil sands were, as a result of the oil sands operations, and how that's impacted their health and well-being, their culture, their connectivity to land, their, addictions, all of those things come along with that. So I'm not opposed to resource development, but we need to just learn how to do resource development in remote areas that are more mindful of the goals and aspirations of the people that already are in those territories and that claim those territories.
Yeah.
So I hope that
I
helps a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at this. Like I've always looked at First Nations as the stewards of the land, and I think that any infrastructure development or major energy projects should involve the First Nations communities. So I'll just leave it at that. And anyways, but thank you for having me up.
Thank you for joining the conversation. You're always welcome. We're here every Monday night. So just before we move on to pumpkin spice, I want to let everyone know, remind you to tapping is clapping and sharing is caring. It is 7:15. We'll hang on for another 15 or 30 minutes or so. We'll see how the conversation takes us. But I just want everyone to know too, I've been a little bit sick this week, so I'm starting to feel my fire fizzle out a little bit. So with that, pumpkin spice, my friend, take it away.
Hey, she's talking about northern communities and bad roads, and my husband is Indigenous, and we currently are not living in the north because of the fact that he's in school, but like we will be, going back home when that's over and everything, and also during like all of our breaks and stuff. But yeah, no, in northern Quebec, for years they neglected the James Bay Highway to the point that it was considered Canada's deadliest highway. The first time that I went up there, the potholes and just rips and tears in the road from the ice were like, you could literally sometimes see that it's bigger than someone's tires, and it goes on for lengths of a car.
I know.
So bad.
It's true. I think this is a common state of infrastructure on reserve, or even roads that are just leading to reserves or that don't have other non-Indigenous users frequent those roadways or that utilizing that infrastructure. It's a common thing. Even, I don't know how many of you are familiar with when you're heading west from Calgary to Banff, there's the Trans-Canada Highway, but there's also the 1A. And the 1A goes through the Stoney Nakoda First Nations. There's 3 First Nations there. And the road is pretty decent as you're leaving Cochrane and heading west towards the mountains. And then as soon as you get onto the reserve, the road narrows and there's no shoulder and there's no pavement. It's rutted and, the pavement's chipping off and it's tight turns and there's no place for if there was an emergency to pull over and things like that. And a lot of our people are pedestrians. Our people don't have vehicles, everybody. So that's why we see a lot of our people walking and if there's no shoulder, like what does that do for safety? And then we have the added layer now of climate change when you think about the roads in the north. So one of my bucket list trips that I want to do is take the ice road from Fort McMurray to Fort Chip, spend a night in Fort Chip, and then go from Fort Chip to Fort Smith on the ice roads before the ice road is no longer a thing. And I want to do this for 2 reasons, because I want to experience it. And I when I started hearing about the ice road, and I remember learning that, mid-November till mid-March, you could be on the ice road. Now that window has narrowed to like early December to end of February, sometimes mid-February. So that window of safety is closing because the ice road doesn't stay frozen. But another reason I want to do that trip is because Wood Buffalo National Park is between Fort Chip and Fort Smith. And thank you. We've reached our goal. Thank you for the gifts, everybody. But in Wood Buffalo National Park, the bison and the wolves remain intact. Their relationship has never been altered by humans. So I want to, and a lot of people, I've heard from so many folks that do take that trip, that they always see the wolves and the bison. So I'm hopeful that, if I do get to do it one day, I'm going to see that. But I think about even that. Ice roads are really critically important to a lot of our northern communities, and I'm good. They're slowly disappearing with climate change.
Those communities are going to be in a lot of trouble when those are gone. It's not going to be good.
I know, it's
Well,
really sad.
Treaty Six.
Okay.
You might be familiar with the saying. You see a lot of First Nations walking on their own reserves because the potholes have eaten their cars.
Yeah. I'm serious. When I worked out in Musquecheese, like I went through 2 vehicles. One counselor I knew, I think he had 6 vehicles in the 5 years I worked there.
Oh
It's
yeah,
yeah, like your suspension and your brakes and like that kind of stuff always seems to go.
yeah, because it takes such a pounding on the potholes and those ruts.
Absolutely. And I've heard from a friend of mine also who works in for the federal government, and we need to start making the connections for the people that do the funding, because we get services that come out to reserve, like medical transportation,
Yep.
ambulance, police, fire. Maybe there's even seniors getting medication delivered and things like that.
Yep.
It's a real barrier to our health outcomes when our road conditions are limiting our ability to access those services.
So my mom, I'm up in Mackenzie, BC here. So my
Like
mom
that
does,
Sasquatch.
yeah, my mom does. We call it the Kimta bus. So it's a bus that does. Seniors have a bus with Northern BC, but we also have one just for if you don't have medical appointments and you're not a senior, and it's for everyone. And basically, it's to stop people from hitchhiking, which is very, very important. We don't need people hitchhiking. And there's like the McLeod Lake Band. We've got people here that hitchhike out to like out by Fort Ware and Seke Dene and stuff like that. And that drive from Mackenzie to Seke Dene, oh my God. Summertime, you have to have 4-wheel drive and 10 ply tires like a logger. I would never take my little car out there. It's crazy. And that is, if it's not that, like when my brother was logging in Fort Ware up there with Chucho, we had to fly parts. He had his own buncher, and me and his wife would fly parts on a little plane because we're like, we're not driving it. We're like, no, I love you. We're not driving it. We'll send you parts on a plane. So, I mean, the amount of little rural communities, I'm sure other provinces are exactly like BC, where I'm sure all you guys, Alberta, Ontario, where you have all these small rural, mostly indigenous, lots of indigenous communities, and they absolutely, like, if they need cancer treatment, if they need to go to medical appointments, if they need to go for like events, like they've got hockey teams and stuff, like kids jump on the bus, and we have big hockey events here in Mackenzie, and it's scary. Like, I worry sometimes. You hear, oh, a bus is coming from here in the winter. I'm like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. Like, genuinely, even with a qualified class 3 driver, you're like, ooh, I don't know. That makes me worry. And yeah, it's scary how many communities rely on the safety of those roads, and they are not, unless there is a mine or a logging camp or there's tourists that use it, they don't care. Those roads, like, they do not get graded very often, and they're graded in such a way where they're not pulling the ditch back. You've got huge ruts and holes and rocks, and they're just not maintaining it the same way. You can tell the road to like McLeod Lake versus the road out to like off the Mugaha to go out logging. Day and night, the Mugaha looks beautiful. It looks fantastic, and the other road looks terrifying. It's scary how some people you'll see people broke down on the side of the road because it's just beaten up their car. It's taken out a wheel hub or a bearing or a ball joint, and like a wheel bearing, like your tire can fly off your car. You can go and
I've
crash and have a very serious accident. It's really
Definitely.
scary.
I've even
Yeah.
heard of some ruts that were so bad that they sheared off the lug nuts.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, 100%.
I totally hear you, Sasquatch, about the thing about the mining, because like I'm pretty sure that the only reason why they've even decided to like basically renovate and like renew the Billy Diamond Highway, as we call it now, is because of the fact that our Grand Chief signed this like big resource deal that nobody was okay with. In order for them to do mining, and they're going to have like this huge train that's coming through, so of course they need to make the Billy Diamond Highway like nice so that trucks can come through.
Yep,
And
yep.
it's like,
Wow.
now they're putting in Starlink satellites so that it's safe, because people used to get stranded on the roads and there's no way to get contact with anybody unless you see someone on the side of the road and you have to leave your car there.
Yep.
And so now they're creating these safety measures, but is it really for the nation of EOSG? Not really.
No.
It's self-serving. Yeah, we get to use those things, but like it's not about us, right? Like,
And
It's like
we think if they tax the rich, they go, oh well, you have to cut something here, and oh, their money's not there. If we tax the rich, every single road that has where people live, where there are communities and there are tax-paying citizens, and any citizen of this country living there, they should have. It's Canada. How regulated? Like, as someone that is in the trades, everything is so heavily regulated. Why is like water and roads and infrastructure, even the housing quality of some, like I've been seeing like the CBC on TikTok, and you see these people living in trailers that are just rotten and full of mold. They're cold. They do not have proper heat and insulation. How is that allowed to continue? But yet, when I was applying I was looking at a mine after my heavy duty mechanic course, and not only like you need to have your certification, they want my tools. You have to buy certain brands of tools and vehicles that have to have a low carbon footprint and be eco-friendly and green. So you're going to regulate my tools at the mine, but there's people that don't have safe roads and clean drinking water. That is insanity to me. That is like, that's a white person running that. A white person made that rule, because like to focus on that versus people's safety is insane to me. It's the things you see in the trades. Yes, I'm glad there's safety and there should be environmental regulation. I'm good with that, but not when people aren't safe. That's a stupid priority. That's crazy.
Well, thank you for. Oh, sorry, Real Natives. Curtis did have his hand up, so I want to let him.
Tons of Real Native. You just missed John A. McDonald was on the panel earlier.
Yeah.
Normando.
I was scared when I saw that name. I was like, oh no.
I was like, oh my God.
Like, what does this guy want?
Yeah, he was so nice. I saw that name in the picture. I was like, what is going on in this life?
But he was kind. He was kind. Yeah. So we had a pop-in visit from Sir John A. McDonald. But Sasquatch, thank you for noticing these things. A lot of people are oblivious to this. They don't draw make the connections and see, that road that's looking so rough is the only road that goes into that reserve, or, and people don't even notice. They actually blame the Indigenous people for that.
Yep.
Or they question, look at their cars. Why are their cars so run down? Why are their houses so poor? Well, I don't know if you were here earlier when I was saying that the First Nation I work for was still operating on a 1980s housing budget.
And even running on a 2015 budget would be absolutely ludicrous. That breaks my heart.
Our reserve is running off. Our water plant was built in 1980.
Wow. The one thing I will say, I don't know if other people notice this, but I've been noticing like a couple of guys on my snow removal crew, and where else was I? Guys that I worked with in their First Nations, and man, are they ever trying to certify them for water treatment certificates? And I'm like, good, they should be in there. Like, give them funding to do stuff. I don't know what it is lately. Like 3 people in the last year that were all First Nations guys, and they all left the job site for a better job to do this water treatment technician certificate. And I'm like, good, man, go get some clean water for your boys, man. Get it done. Let's go.
You know what it is? It is a lot of reserves. People don't understand this, like that don't live on reserve. You get funding for, say, maybe 15 people to take some kind of safety training so that they can go out and work. They get their certificates to go out and work. That's 15 people out of maybe 1,000, 2,000 a year. Yeah. You're allowed 50 out of that many people. You're given funding to get them out to the trades. And they say that natives don't want to work, but yet you're only allowed 15 people.
But yet me as a white person, they gladly paid me 20 grand because I was looking into my student loan. I was at Work BC, and I went, I'm gonna go and get some certificates. And he said, hey, if you've already run equipment and you're having trouble in logging, we have a mining course at O'Brien. And I hustled my butt for 3 months and I did it all myself. But man, they paid 20 grand for my schooling. They didn't bat an eye. And yes, of course, I paid that back in taxes in 6 months. But why is that not available? I will say, though, the Native Friendship Center in Prince George, there was probably, 15 people through that program. So I will say the Native Friendship Center in Prince George. My mom's friend actually founded it. I'm like, I'm so lucky to be surrounded with Native people that do so much good. And the way people talk about them, and I'm like, do you know how much good that Native Friendship Center has done since the 90s? You can't fathom how much help. They pulled my friend's tooth a couple weeks ago. She couldn't afford dental, and they pulled her tooth. You know? Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's my reserve has a band list of 1,500 people. Of those 1,500 people, only 5 in 20 years have been certified to run heavy equipment. 5.
And you know what? Native people are wicked operators.
Good.
I can tell you, they are such good operators. You will never see anyone hit grade like a young Native guy. Man, they can run equipment. Well, they're so deadly uncles, man.
I wanted to touch on the point you made earlier about the roads, and it only came about after mining, and that was, it's almost like they forced your reserve into a deal with the industry so that they could, have something basic like roads, and that's the way the government does it. They it's almost like the old days where they starved us by killing off the buffalo, and they starved us into a deal. In this case, they're using into a deal just so we can get basic necessities.
I totally agree with you.
There should be more give and take for us. I'm reading one of the comments. He says give and take. Yeah, like they give a little and they take a lot.
Yes.
When you enter into a deal with an oil company, they will make like a 1 or maybe 2 year deal, and when that deal is done, they are done with you. They will not come back.
And that road goes back. Yep. And that road goes back into disrepair. The water, any water treatment or any kind of programs that are available are just instantly defunded. You betcha.
But if I could chime in on this. So because I am a duty to consult practitioner, and I have learned over my career to do a little better. So I always make sure that those are the kinds of things that if you're going to be having, like if it's a company that's in close proximity to the nation that I was working for, if you're going to be having some equipment nearby, then you're going to be fixing your road. You better be coming on to our nation and fixing the roads out here too, or at least contributing to the maintenance budget that we have. Like I was able to negotiate a brand new fire truck for our nation.
Awesome.
I was able to also, when I negotiate with resource developers like coal mines and oil companies, I always make sure that there's a relationship until that mine or that activity, that well site, whatever it is in place until that site is done, cleaned up, decommissioned, closed, restored, and everything's back to the way it was in some way. It never goes back to perfect, but it's getting better. So, and what Sasquatch was talking about with this chief that signed off on a deal that probably, I think I heard you say that the people weren't so supportive of. This is really unfortunate. And again, this points back to what we were talking about earlier and how these companies and government take advantage of our financial needs. Yes. And so they come in with these, we can give you $1 million today, but we need you to write a letter of support or a letter of non-objection, they'll say, for this project that we want to build. And then they also try to add terms and conditions to these agreements that will limit the ability of the people that reside in the nation that they have the agreement with from protest. Now, I saw a company try to sneak that into an agreement that I was negotiating, and I was like, no. Sorry, I can't profess to represent every member of this nation, and I'm never going to be, or nor will this chief and council ever be in the position to prevent them from practicing their rights and their right to protest. So, we've got to be very careful.
It's really unfortunate. I'm not familiar with all of the details because I was only getting into the community like very recently when the deals were signed and everything. And I know that so it wasn't even the chief, it was the grand chief. So apparently not any of the other chiefs were consulted, like of the 11 nations that are part of the nation of UHT. And the people certainly weren't consulted about the situation before the deal was signed, but it got signed and it was signed with the Quebec government and it was just done. And
gotta
it's
tell
been
you
done for a
something.
while. And this whole duty to consult thing where they like come into your community and they ask you and people talk and then they just don't listen to you and they don't have to. Because
Well, they
you
have
just have
to.
to sit there and listen, and they don't have to actually care or do any of the things that you talk to them about or that you're worried about. They can be like, "Oh, sorry, we can't do that," and then they just ignore you.
No, if you're a strong nation, no. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to disagree. And here's one other thing. So that Grand Chief who represents 6 or more or 5 or 3, whatever First Nations, is not the rights bearing community and has no right to sign off on an agreement on behalf of all of those unless those other chiefs have delegated that authority to them.
Okay.
Because this is about rights holders. So a group or a tribal council or a grand chief or like here in Treaty 6 territory, we have the Confederacy of Treaty 6. They don't represent the rights bearing community. The
Okay.
chief of one nation represents their rights bearing community. So my nation is in Saskatchewan. I can't have my rights offset here or even addressed in Alberta because Alberta refuses to speak to my nation and even refuses to acknowledge that Indigenous people move around. I was born and raised in Alberta, but my rights are attached to Treaty 4, even though I live in Treaty 6. So I would push back a little bit if, I know it might be too late and stuff, but that's something to think about in the future is that these are rights that are held by the community. So each First Nation holds the rights for their First Nation. Each group of Métis, that they hold their specific rights. The Inuit community holds their specific rights. And so it's got to be the rights-bearing community that's at the table having the conversation and negotiating the outcome.
It's like tied to the land, kind of basically, like where that.
Yeah, I don't know how
always
it works with the Cree
That's always
Nations
how it is.
because of the fact that like we did a lot of negotiations with the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement already, and like I think that
It's interesting.
they like went through that, in the process because like in the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement, they are allowed to use parts of the territory so long as like they're granted
Yeah,
by
not-
the communities
not
or
every-
by the nation.
Yeah, not every treaty was written or achieved the same way.
But
Some
Yeah,
treaties
we
have
had to
different,
basically, the nation basically
obligations in
fought
them.
to protect the water because Hydro-Quebec stole one of our rivers, and then
but that river has
it was
rights
deemed
now.
that they were in the wrong and they had to like do a certain amount of repayment. And
Wow.
we had such amazing like elders who aren't with us anymore who like took this to court with the Inuit people and with the Cree Nation, and like they hired the lawyers, they did all of the work, and it was deemed by the courts that like the Hydro-Quebec was in the wrong, but they said that they wouldn't pay out unless they took 2 more rivers, and that agreement
They're always
was
gonna try and-
it was accepted
always
by
gonna
the
try and-
elders because they considered that it would be important because we got the right to have like a school board and a health board, and that we had the right to like self-governance. So
there may have been an agreement there that permitted
So
that.
I think that it might have gone through with this new agreement, went through that agreement. And so there might not have been as much like stuff that we could do to like stop it. I know there was a lot of protests. There was somebody who did a hunger strike.
Wow.
Yeah,
And be
but
mindful.
nothing came of it.
So, and duty to consult isn't just for treaty; it's Section 35 Constitution rights as well, right? So, Section 35 enshrines Indigenous rights in this country, and most of the court cases were tested against Section 35, also against treaty, but mostly about Section 35 because it's enshrined in Canadian law.
Awesome.
Right? Because so the treaties the treaties inform law, but the treaties aren't necessarily law, I think. But I'm going to do some research on that, but that's how I understand it. And so we have those 2 streams. We have the treaties and the constitutional rights that we have. And so
Don't forget the Proclamation of 1763, which is where the guidelines for treaties were
and
established.
Aboriginal title.
Don't forget that one.
Aboriginal title is rooted in the Royal Proclamation as
Aboriginal
well.
title.
Anyway,
Yes, that's right. It says right in there, I think it's in the second line. Both sides cannot sell the land, unless
Okay, and
both
I just
sides
want to
agree.
remind everyone in the room, clapping is tapping and sharing is caring. It's just about 22:08, so we're gonna go for.
So
I'll give us 20 more minutes
yeah,
max, okay, everyone? Because I am really starting to feel my energy level fizzle out because I was on the road a lot last week, and of course, it seems like every time I'm in a plane, I get sick.
yeah. So I was going to say within that proclamation is a binding contract that says Canada cannot be annexed unless the Indigenous
Here,
people agree.
let me pull it up. I actually wrote a textbook on
Yeah.
this.
So all of this annexation, 51st state talk is
Absolutely. Yeah,
futile.
you betcha.
Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. Like, you can't just think you're walking in here and you're going to annex
Unless,
land.
yeah, because like even if someone from Canada wanted to, like say a premier or somebody, they would still have to
Yeah,
go
which
through
is right.
us. And I don't see them I don't see the Indigenous people agreeing to that.
No.
They have to go through us and Britain because the treaties are with Britain.
Mhm.
Okay, let me just find
Right,
that royal
that's right.
proclamation here. I have it in.
I was just going to make a really quick point too. We were talking about, resource harvesting and then, the infrastructure and everything left behind after. And I find it very funny that we actually pay and subsidize the oil companies to go and clean when they're done. And there's some huge budget that they get for it. And I swear I saw the number for it. It was under $1 that they've actually spent of that subsidizing. It was like 40 cents they've spent in 30 years. And all that water is left polluted. And they want to talk about, Indigenous people get tax dollars. What about those oil and gas companies? Because they did not take that money and they sure did not go back and
Sasquatch,
clean up the land when they were done. They did not at all. Period. That pollution, you
no, they
see
didn't.
animals getting sick, the
Sasquatch,
water's
are you in
bad.
Alberta?
What's that? No,
Are you in Alberta, Sasquatch?
I'm in northern BC. I'm up in Mackenzie.
Okay. So in Alberta, our dummy premier, Danielle
Oh
Smith,
God, yes.
gave the oil companies billions of dollars to clean up
Yep.
their own
And
mess.
my sister lives in Edmonton, and she is so
And
mad about that.
Okay, wait a second. It wasn't. It was
yeah,
the. Are you sure it's Danielle Smith? Because Trudeau after COVID also gave out. There was quite a few, actually hundreds of millions that were sent to Saskatchewan and Alberta through the provincial governments though. So here was through the Alberta Energy Regulator, and it was called
yeah,
the Site Rehab Program,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they actually utilized a lot of Indigenous contractors. The main focus was supposed to be all the orphan wells and stuff on reserve first and then off reserve, but there was a bunch of mismanagement of that funds through government of Alberta and potentially through our Indian Resource Council.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hey.
Yeah, but I'm going to read to you the royal proclamation, and just do note that Lisa in the comments wanted to let everyone know that she's also done a video on the royal proclamation. So if you wanted to check her out, she's Lisa Dawn D. So I'm going to read briefly for you. Originally issued by King George III to officially claim British territory in North America following their victory in the 7 Years' War. Ownership over North America is issued to the King. However, the Royal Proclamation clearly states that Aboriginal title, inherent right to land or territory existed, and all land would be considered Aboriginal land until ceded by treaty. Settlers were forbidden to take up or claim land from Aboriginal occupants unless it was first bought by the Crown, then sold to the settlers. It is set out within the proclamation that only the Crown can purchase land from First Nations. And here's the quote. And whereas it is just and reasonable and essential to our interest and the security of our colonies that the several nations or tribes of Indians with whom we are connected, thank you, and who live under our protection should not be molested or disturbed in the possession of such parts of our dominions and territories as, not having been ceded to or purchased by us, are reserved to them or any of them as their hunting grounds. So it did lay a foundation that I reflect on this from time to time, and I feel like the newcomers that came here really kind of disobeyed their king.
Yep. Not only were they colonizers, but they were basically traitors to their king as well.
Yeah, just thinking about like literally the first prime minister since he took a little appearance in this. Like that's exactly what he did, right? He it went exactly against everything that was in there. It was an absolutely forceful, active, like disobedience to his king.
And imagine that you're such a colonizer that you go against the monarch of Britain, and you're more of a colonizer than the monarch of Britain. Like, what level? That's like the biggest colonizer. How do you top that? And I say that with British, English blood in my veins. Like, those are some pretty bad colonizers. How do you top that?
Yeah, like I live in unceded territory, and not up north with me and my husband, but where he goes to school. It's unceded territory. There's not a single Abenaki person who has like their land here being respected. It's a full city. Like there's no reserve land, there's no anything. It's just
It makes me really sad too to think that in the States, and I don't know enough about anything and how it works down there, but the national parks, and I don't know if there's overlap with Indigenous lands and the national parks, but if we see Trump, and he's not going to get any real wood out of that, because where their national parks are, typically there's not a ton of forest there, and it's very hard to go in and log that. But how is that going to look for Indigenous people after because there's not that much wood. There's a reason why they buy so much lumber and raw wood from Canada. Once they're done with those national parks, what are they going to do next to the Indigenous communities there? They don't care. If they're going to take away tourism revenue and, they look so good, what would they do to Indigenous people? I cannot imagine.
Well,
really trying to ice raids on Indigenous people. Like, hello, they listen. They're Indigenous.
That's what I was just gonna say too. Like ICE has already been picking up Indigenous people, in error, they say, but it's happening. And you're right. And I've also heard rumors now. Like I haven't, because I've been on the road a lot, so I was actually had a kind of a week off of TikTok, which was kind of nice for my mental health. But I heard somebody talking about Trump wants to change the borders. Yep. What does that mean?
Yeah. So there's this document that exists that says that the border should have been on a different river, except for the fact that river it's not joined together. Like it wasn't joined together at the time either. But the theory is that we went through all of the Great Lakes instead of going through this one river pass. I believe that goes through like Quebec and Ontario. That would basically mean that we don't have access to any of the Great Lakes. That would be how our border would be. But based on the topography, it's probably the person who wrote that report was wrong.
Yeah,
it
just like doesn't make sense because you can't split a watershed of a river that doesn't join together.
No, exactly.
Trump
So
said
he's deliberately trying to redraw
Okay, everybody, we're talking over each other. And we have two new folks that have joined the conversation. I want to give them also a chance, okay? So, Paul, go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm excellent. I just think it's a great idea what you're doing here and making people aware of situations that exist.
Thank you.
And bringing it to light. And I'm surrounded by Indigenous people. They're my family. And I have very much love for the Indigenous folk. So yeah, I just wanted you to know that.
We really appreciate that, Paul, and we're so happy to form community here, and we're happy that you've joined the conversation, and you're welcome to join us. We're here every Monday night at 6:00 Mountain Standard Time, so tune in, and we have lots of interesting conversations. So thanks for joining us tonight. And is it Noel?
Noel.
Noel. Okay, Noel. Sorry.
That's all right. Hi, kia ora. I'm Noel, and I'm originally from Alberta, but I live in New Zealand. I've been living in New Zealand since 2008.
Oh.
Yeah, so I still follow a lot of Canadian politics and everything else. But it's interesting to learn, like especially watching your lives, about the different, treaties and all that kind of stuff. Like I wasn't aware of, and it kind of relates to like what's happening in New Zealand as well, to a certain extent. So I enjoy it. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Noel. I've met some interesting folks from New Zealand. I was fortunate enough, I was in Ottawa for a conference. And I'm on the board of directors for this organization, and I'll give them a shameless plug. It's the Indigenous Center for Cumulative Effects, and we do some really good work there. But we had some folks, some Maori folks from New Zealand. They happened to be in Ottawa just for visiting, and they noticed or heard about our conference, so they called us up to see if they could come in and participate. And of course we made space for them, and they were just wonderful people. And I watch, actually I do watch what happens over in New Zealand in the is it a parliament system there too, I believe,
Yes,
right?
it
And
is. Yeah, it's very
yeah,
similar. Yeah.
it's quite
Uh,
interesting.
You know, Burger, it never surprises me.
You're cutting out,
Or
Real Native.
30s, 40s, 50s. Oh, am I
Yeah, you're kind of in and out a little bit. I
better?
heard 30s, 40s, 50s.
Okay.
There you go. You
it is
sound good
better.
now.
One,
Go ahead.
yeah, I forgot to put my Wi-Fi back on my phone. So
Oh,
anyway, it never surprises me to that how many of our Canadians that are not Indigenous know so little about the treaties. But I'm not saying but I'm saying like other people who come into our lives, and they're hearing this stuff for the first time, and they're surprised that this is stuff they didn't know, and they've lived in Canada their whole life.
Yeah.
It we meet them every day, every day.
I can honestly say before my career, I really didn't know a lot about our history either because I was sheltered from it. Besides, for I had an uncle who was very active in Indigenous politics and Métis politics specifically. And when I was 10 years old, I think I've told you this before, Real Native, but he flew me to Ottawa and I marched on
Yeah,
Parliament Hill with him and his family. So, but
yeah,
that was my
yeah,
only real exposure until I started working for Indian Affairs. But I it was it's been a
yeah,
journey, and I'm kind of sometimes grateful that I had that kind of upbringing because it gives me a better understanding sometimes for our non-Indigenous fellow Canadians because I
yeah,
didn't know either,
yeah.
right?
I was very fortunate growing up
You
in the
are.
family I grew up in. Politics was an everyday thing. I grew up right from the 70s, right from a fetus practically. My dad was a chief in 1971, was involved in politics in 67, and so my mom was pregnant, my dad was
Yeah.
already in
Oh wow.
politics. But yeah, we grew up. I grew up in a very political household. My father, so political. As a 10-year-old, I can remember my dad not allowing us to watch our kiddie shows until um, the news was over. And then my dad would throw little questions at us like, "Who was just talking?" And we that was the premier. What's his name? John
Mm.
Layton.
Awesome.
You know.
I was at the Fort
Yeah.
Edmonton Indigenous Peoples Experience, and I'm pretty sure there's someone from your family that has a lot of quotes on the walls there.
Oh. Are you
Yep,
talking about
I'm
my
talking
Uncle
about your
Ron or
Uncle
my
Ron.
dad?
Lots of quotes from him. I was like, oh, I got to, and I took some pictures
Oh
for
yeah.
you, actually. I'm going to
Yeah.
send them to you. Yeah, but
Oh, nice. Nice, nice.
Noel, did you want to add
Yeah.
anything more to the discussion?
Yeah, I'm just gonna tell you like my heritage in growing up in Canada. Like my family came over in 1900 from Ukraine and to
Hmm.
Alberta, and we ended up. I think at the time, from what my Baba said, she said that they give you land if you could clear it and start farming crops, wheat or whatever.
You're talking. You're talking about the.
Yeah,
Mm,
and then if you build the house within
yeah.
5 years, then it's your land or whatever. I don't know how they did it, but
Yeah.
that's basically what we did. We were like, I think in the U.S. at the time, and then Canada was advertising for Ukrainian farmers to come and farm the prairies.
So in 1900, the treaty was signed, and Alberta was established in 1905, I believe. But here's this. I have Can you? I don't know if you can see it. This is we call it a kokum scarf, and this was adopted from our Ukrainian neighbors because the Ukrainian settlers that came here formed friendships with a lot of the First Nations. And actually, working in Central Alberta, the First Nation I worked for, there's elders that told me that the neighboring Ukrainian farmers would actually hire them to come for fencing or help them round up cattle and, you name it, do some haying and things like that. And they had a really positive, mutually respectful relationship. And the Ukrainian people were also discriminated against when they came here. So that's kind of what was kind of the glue that binded us, right? The Ukrainians and the Indigenous people. So that's really awesome that we kind of have a little shared history in a way.
And my son here, I have one son, and he's half Maori, half Ukrainian, I guess. And he knows like how to speak full Te Reo, the language here. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, it is 5 to 8. So we're going to start wrapping things up, and I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes or a minute, whatever you need to do some closing remarks. As usual, I try to start us off with a conversation, and we always end up on some other topics, but that's quite all right because that's the way we are. And I love the conversations that we have here every week, and I love the community that we're building, and I'm so happy to see your faces. It brings me lots of joy. So Curtis, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you. And I'm just can't believe John A. McDonald came on the panel. It's like, oh my God. That's all I have to say.
I know when I saw him in the guest, like when he wanted to come up and I saw the request, I was like, what? There's this guy's name. Oh no, what's going to happen? Thought maybe we were going to have some kind of heated conversation, but he turned out to be quite kind. So, okay, Real Native.
We need to protect our lands, our resources. This election has never been more important for Indigenous people than it is right now, because our resources, our land, are under threat right now from overexploitation, and we're being pushed to the side constantly by these corporations who are, I have to say someone's getting kicked back somewhere for all this stuff to be happening. It's money can cause such horrific greed. That's my rant.
Thank you so much.
We need to quote you on that. Record it and write it down. We have to write that down and have him quoted on that. That's excellent.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And that's a good time for me to remind everyone that if you missed something tonight or you want to go back and rehear it, this will be posted on YouTube tomorrow. Thank you, Real Native. I 100% agree with you. These are our lands, our resources. We never gave them up. And we should be living at the same standard as other Canadians, and we should be having a voice in the way in which our lands and our resources are being utilized. So thank you for that. I appreciate you in kinship, my friend. Pumpkin spice latte.
I mean, I don't know what to say after that. Well, as an ally, definitely 1,000% agree with you guys on that. And thank you for having me so much. It was good having this conversation with you. I feel like I learned a lot, so I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. We always appreciate having everybody's voice heard around this table. Thank you. Sasquatch, go ahead, my friend.
All I want to say is that I'm just very grateful as somebody that's non-Indigenous to just be allowed into this space at all, to even listen, let alone be allowed to contribute. And is my, perspective from a white person? Yes, but from growing up with so much Indigenous family and friends and living in a community that's so closely touched by it, it means a lot that I'm even allowed in these spaces, that people let me come and be smudged. Like anytime that somebody has so much love in their heart as a human being to go, you know, your culture really tried to eradicate mine, and they turn around with love and welcome and open arms, is a testament to how incredible Indigenous culture is. And it's based on community and love. And if we started taking a page out of your guys' book, I think the world would turn around pretty quick and be a pretty different place. So I just want to say I have the utmost respect and gratitude for just being allowed to even sit here and listen, let alone speak.
Well, thank you for joining us again. I really enjoy having you here, and thank you for your kind words and for noticing, you know, that we are forgiving people and we are good people, and we just want to be at the same table with everybody. Thank you so much, Sasquatch. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I just gonna say the same thing. Basically, I just good for you to create a great place that information can be shared, and the more Indigenous people do that, it's going to the awareness is going to be healthy, and you're going to find a lot of white folk or any culture can contribute to your successes.
Thank you
That's
so
it.
much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you know, the more we do things like this, the more we get to know each other. And I really feel bad for non-Indigenous Canadians who were denied the opportunity to know who we are for so long, because a lot of people were taught that we were, you know, drunks or tax
Yeah,
burdens or whatever, right? So I'm
yeah.
really glad that we have this space too, and that we're meeting folks like you and the others that have joined the conversation. So thanks for coming in tonight, and you're welcome to join us anytime.
Thank you.
No, we'll turn it over to you.
I just want to say thank you for having me, and I just want to like say how much I respect the Indigenous culture in Canada, especially, um, and how they think about life and the ecosystem and how everything is connected. That really resonates with me, and I've always thought that even from a young kid, and I think more people should take more governments and stuff should actually take a leaf out of that book, because we're using up our resources at an exponential rate, and there's going to be nothing left.
Oh, amen, my friend. We have 8 billion people on this planet, and I don't want to depress everybody, but I'll leave you with a little stat that I have learned. And you know, I do work in this sector, and I am a biologist. I understand that for the last, I think, 5 years now, by March, the first quarter of every year, we are using up all of the resources available to us as humans on this planet. So but together, when we have these conversations, we can turn these things around. And we have seen, as Indigenous people and non Indigenous people alike, that Mother Earth can heal herself. Sometimes we need give her a little nudge and help her along the way. But when we have these voices like this around these tables, and we have unity amongst ourselves and with each other, we can make things happen and we can do things differently. So I appreciate you all so much for being here. I want to let you know you've joined me tonight. I'm Treaty 6 Birder. So if you want to follow me also there, I'm Treaty 6 Birder. And I host Indigenous Matters at the Beaver Politics Network every Monday night at 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow night on the Beaver Politics Network, it is News Hour hosted by Frontline Feminist. And that's where she's highlighting the biggest news from the weekend or news you might be missing and bringing it to the forefront. And oftentimes she has an open discussion afterwards, so we can talk about news matters there. On Wednesday night, we have the Mossy Side hosted by the Progressive Moose. It's the messy side of politics, doing deep dives into weekly topics. On Thursday in the afternoon, we have the Navigation Station hosted by the Misses at 1 o'clock Pacific Time. 4 o'clock Eastern Time, where she discusses education, resources, and solutions to help navigate the Canadian political landscape. And in the Thursday evenings, we have Truth Through Discourse, which is hosted by Mrs. Radical. And we have weekly discussions on relevant news topics or social issues. That one can be a really fun live to join. On Fridays, it is Canadian History with a Purple Crayon in the afternoon, hosted by Pixie Lee. That's 2 o'clock Pacific time. And it's Canadian History prior to Canada, with a focus on BIPOC perspectives. And then Friday night, it's the Basham Smasham Poly Talk, hosted by Nerdy, where we have weekly debates over politics and social issues, focusing on Canada and including the United States. And that's where we welcome everybody up, all perspectives, to have debate. She's been known to have her live go for 6 hours, sometimes more. So
We
those
did
are
a 12-hour last time.
yeah, they're pretty good times on a Friday night. And then Saturday, we have Breaking the Dam, hosted by Jana, where she discussed safe space focusing on ongoing mental health in tough times, learning new coping skills, increasing mental health awareness, and fighting stigmas. That's at 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. And then Saturday evenings, we have Radicalized, hosted by Radical. That's 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern time. And that's where he talks about the gray matter of politics and how religion is impacting the political atmosphere. Pretty interesting conversations over there. And then on Sunday, our newest beaver is Happy, and he hosts the Damn Happy Life at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time, where he's looking for a new, deeper perspective on how people define happiness and exploring the moments of growth throughout their lives. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I look forward to seeing you again next Monday. Have a beautiful evening. Stay
Sorry,
deadly,
what
my
time was the
friends.
Friday one at? What
Friday?
time? Yeah.
That is, we have two. One in the afternoon. That's the Canadian History of the Purple Crayon, 2 o'clock Pacific time. And then Poly Talk, the big debate night, is 5 o'clock Pacific time, so 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. That one's hosted by Nerdy, and that's the really wild, fun times that we all get together
Okay.
and
So it'll be around
debate.
6 o'clock on Saturday here, I think, or somewhere around there. I'll have to look it up.
Okay. Stay well, everyone, and stay deadly. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.